we have a bad hum. Anybody know why? Maybe I've just got my monitor turned up too loud. Yeah, there we go. All right, coming in soon, gang. There we go. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining me again today. On a little bit earlier than normal. So I hope, like Monique, it's not bedtime yet. I hope you catch us. Of course, if I come on this early, you're probably in the middle of a busy day's work. I understand. Let's get official. This is Daily Art Adventure number 956, crawling our way toward the number 1000. At which point, I expect to be good at this. Okay, so until then, cut me some slack. I've only done it 955 times, so, you know, give a guy a break. All right. Final glazes and touch-ups on this 4X portrait of 4 people. There you see one of my photo references. Here's another one. And then I also print them close to the right size. Anyway, oh, we're not legal yet. There, now we're legal. Anyway, hello. Today's Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. We did indeed. We had a very special weekend. Okay. Sometimes I talk myself right into the middle of a cul-de-sac. I'm saying about what a great weekend we had. And then my next sentence is going to be, we had a very special memorial service for our daughter who passed away 2 weeks ago. And some of you, I'm giving some of you whiplash, like, what? So I am sorry about that. Long story, won't go into it. We lost the 37-year-old daughter to Huntington's disease. Of course we're sad, but we're not impossibly sad, because we actually, truly believe we're going to see her again. So my heart goes out to all of you who don't have that hope. If you don't want to be an atheist, you don't have to be. If you want to be a follower of Jesus, you can choose to be so. I understand by saying that word, I'm sending some of you into apoplectic fits, but all right. Considering how often I don't say it, that's pretty remarkable. Bless you. Hello, Pink Haze Pie. Good morning. And Miguel Luis. All right, let's get talking about portrait painting, all right? Now, okay, let me back up. I wish that I had all 4 of these portraits brought up to the same level, but on Friday I had a very short time to paint, and I was only able to get this one face. Let me say that again. This face is ahead of these 3. That's why she looked a little bit brighter. So for this broadcast, I'm going to demonstrate final steps. So I feel I'm down to finishing touches on this face. These faces, not so much. Okay, so I'm going to do this face first because I've entitled this broadcast "Final Glazes and Finishing or Touches or Touch-Ups." All right. So let me put my reference back up here. By the way, one of the tricks, if you will, that I use to help me capture a likeness is I'll print on my printer, on my computer, which is behind you guys over there, with Photoshop in a plain old cheap Hewlett-Packard printer. I'll measure this and then print this the same size. Now I'm not sure, this looks a little bit big to me, but I'm past getting all the lines in the right place. Let me just hasten to say, by the way, if anything in this face looks off to you, which it may very well, but here's a teaching moment. I want you to understand that I have it on good authority, quote unquote, I'm being kind of funny. All of these lines, all of the edges are correct. Are you with me? All the lines are in the right place. So if you say, her chin looks a little short, her looks, anything like that, looks a little off, there's tiny things. I'm going to take the edge of this nose down, 1/100th of an inch, but you're probably not seeing that. So if something looks off, which it may very well look off, here's what I want you to understand. It's not because the lines, the edges aren't in the right place, that they're pretty much exact. Let me see if I still have a, oh, I do, here we go. Let me show you how I know that, because I use tricks to help me get it right, okay? So here is, I traced, this image right here, this is the one that's the right size. Do you understand? So I traced, this is one of my final check techniques. All right, and then I tape this on here. Now, if this doesn't line up here, then my painting is off. Do you understand? But I've already done this, so I'm pretty confident that all my lines are in the right place. Do you understand why I'm so confident? Actually, there is, I'm going to carve down the cheek. No, I actually moved that cheek out because I was cheating. That's right, because anyway, I'm getting myself in trouble. That was one area where I literally disagreed with the camera. I believe that if I fuzz this cheek out further, it'll be more realistic than if I do it. But that's another subject for another day. So you are allowed to cheat to make it look more like the person, but you're not allowed to fall short of reality by having lines in the wrong place. All right, that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, back to what I was going to say. So that's why I'm confident that these marks are right. All right? I mean, I'm sorry that I'm sorry that I have to go to such an extent. I'm sorry that my skills are not at the level where I can simply, look and copy and know that I'm perfect. I'm sorry that's not my skill level. I wish it were. Guess what? Very, very, very few people have that skill level. I'll tell you who does. The old Chinese men, could be women, but they're all men, in Manhattan, New York, who do portraits on the street. Those are the most uncanny, freakishly skilled people. And I asked one of them, he was probably in his 60s, this 10 years ago, I said, how are you so good? And he said in his Chinese American accent, he said, well, I started when I was 5. And he's done nothing but portraits for 55 years. So there you go. The answer is simple. All right, now let me get back to, if something looks out of place, this is the teaching point I want to get to, which it may very well do. It's not because the lines are in the right place. See, this is a mistake that portrait painters, including me, often make. We think the line is in the wrong place when in fact it's not that. It's the shading. It's something's too light or too dark. So let me rephrase that. Once you know that all your edges and lines are accurate, you're not done. Because then there's, for instance, let me zoom in real close here. I'm going to move you guys for just a second so you hope to see a little bit better. For instance, now I'm going to use a pointer. Do you see the width of this crease right here? Right here, it's about 1/4 of an inch from there to there. But over here on the photograph, it's not all one color. There's a line inside a line. So this is in the right place, but it's not rendered quite accurately enough. There's supposed to be a more differentiation. Let me think of another one here. Let me see if I can find another one. Well, okay, so the kind of thing that goes wrong, here's one. Do you see this dark area right here? I sort of have her eyebrow, and her eyebrows do have this sort of orangish, reddish tone in the photograph, and I have that reflected. But here, it's as if this dark area continues. It's like a fishhook. Right there, do you see that? Over here, whoa, not so. So again, it's not so much that this is in the wrong place, it's just that this is the wrong color. More specifically, the wrong value. It's too dark. So something like that, because that darkness is not there, that will give us the feeling like something's not right. All right, so that's all I'm going to say about that for now. While I'm teaching, let me tell you where I'm at in my portrait journey. I'm better than I used to be. Noticeably better than I used to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. But I want to get better than I am today. And I've been, here's what I think what happens in the art world in general. Hopefully, we never stop growing as artists. And that's one of the, man, that's one of the great things about being an artist. Here I am, 66 years old, been an artist since I was a kid, and I still feel like I'm just on the cusp of becoming a good artist or a better artist. I mean, I'm still learning. It's so great. Art is amazing. I mean, if you're an athlete, you're done in your mid to late 30s, you know? If you're a musician, it's getting kind of sketchy after 50. I'm a musician. I'm rebuking that thought, by the way. I'm still improving as a musician, too, but that's another story. Here's the one thing that I'm discerning. When I look at really, really good portrait painters and their work, here's the latest thing I've discovered. That they are much more accurate than I have been in discerning values, lightness and darkness. And let me demonstrate that for you right here. And there's a lot of people I could point to. Mark Carter with a D is certainly one. So I'm going to put up here one of my photo references. It's an extra one. All right, let me tell you how this is a, not such a great photo, by the way, but it can still work. Let me tell you how a mediocre, like myself, 2, 3, 4 years ago, okay? Let me tell you how a mediocre portrait painter, let's just focus on this woman's forehead. Here's how a mediocre portrait painter sees this forehead. Of course, we have the edge, and let's assume we have all the, the drawing is done and the lines are in the right place. So we have this, that's the area I'm talking about. Okay, a mediocre portrait painter sees, oh, it is such and such a color, and the light is coming from upper left-hand corner, and we have a highlight here, and a shadow area here, and a darker shadow here, and midtones in between. And at that point, the mediocre portrait painter sort of turns off their critical seeing. They've had it turned on just enough to see, oh, color, highlight, midtone, shadow. And then they proceed to paint. Highlight, midtone, shadow. Okay, that's mediocre. Here's what I have discerned that an excellent portrait painter does. They don't turn their eyes off at that simplistic level. Instead, they see, here's one color, here's another color, here's another color, here's another color. I'm being overly simple here to make the point. Here's another color, and the lines go this way too. All right? Do you see the difference? Simple portrait, you just see big shapes, and that's good enough. Let's talk about the cheek for a minute. So once again, beginner portrait says, ooh, highlight, ooh, shadow, and then paints. From that point, they paint out of their head, out of their mind. It's like, I know what a highlight looks like. I know what a shadow looks like. I don't need to look at the photograph anymore. Or it's even better, the live model. Do you understand? But once again, a more skilled portrait painter will see this color and this one. This time I'll use circles. And this one, 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 and so on. You see what I mean? So, in my opinion, this is one of the great differences between a so-so portrait painter and a more advanced portrait painter. The more advanced portrait painter continues to see critically. Now, some of you might be saying, doggone, that's a lot of work. And in fact, I agree with you. I agree with you, and that's part of what irritates me in this job in particular. It really, this is day number 5, I think. I'm not sure. It's either 4 or 5. I forget. I don't mean I spent all day. No. But maybe 2 hours a day. And I look back at the olden days and say, man, I used to be able to finish a portrait like this in 2.5 hours. How come I could do that? Oh, it's because I was doing what I talked about earlier. I just see the highlight, see the shadow, and just paint out of my head. So what I'm describing now takes a lot longer, but the product, the result is a lot better. All right? Whew. And believe me, I'm preaching that sermon to myself, so to speak. All right, now let's talk about, first of all, everything here is dry. The last time I finished was on Friday. I painted this on Friday. See me rubbing it. And some of you, if you're a traditional oil painter, you're going, egads, that's not dry yet. So let's get one thing straight. By the way, it was dry on Saturday. The reason my paintings dry so fast is because I use, first of all, a generous amount of liquid, which is fast dry. And in these final stages, when I'm doing light highlights, I'm using an alkyd titanium white. All right, so there you go. That's why. So if you haven't discovered the magic of fast drying oil paints, then otherwise this would take a lot longer. All right, now let's get to the subject at hand. Let me say hi to hello, Miguel. Thank you very much. You're very kind. We are doing very well. Thank you, Samwia D and Otmain Mishahai. Let me try that again. And I'm guessing it's Otmane Mishahi. Bless you. Pink Haze Pie portrait painters are amazing. They are. The good ones are amazing. Now, I want to talk, and point this at myself for just a minute, so when I'm talking to you guys, talk about glazing. Again, if you had to take my work, and you can go to dannelsonart.com, brand new rebuilt website, and if you wanted to come up with one, in the oil painting world, one word to describe my oil painting technique, it would be transparent. I'm that guy that paints layers and layers and layers of transparent color, okay? Which puts me in the minority in the 20th. I know we're in the 21st century, but I'm using this language carefully. It puts me in the distinct minority in the 20th century. I'm a product of the 20th century, you understand. And in the 20th century, the magic of transparency was lost and was replaced with the clunkiness of opacity. So most of you, if you're a product of the 20th and probably the 21st century so far too, then you learn to paint opaque. And that's okay. There's some great painters that paint opaque. But they would be better than they are if they regained the magic all the old masters knew. Every great painter before 1890, every great painter before 1890 painted in, like me, better than me, but they painted in layers of translucent, transparent, opaque at the very last. All right, so layers and layers and layers. And I find student after student, I mean the great majority of painters whose work I judge and whose work I see in a critique group, they're still painting straight out of the tube. And that's all right. You can be a great painter, but if you want to be a greater painter, learn the magic of glazing. Now here, when we talk about glazing, that means you need a medium. In the olden days, my dad was a painter. In the olden days, when my dad painted, glaze meant you took linseed oil, because that's pretty much all anybody painted with was linseed oil, which was an extreme slow drying product, which means it slowed everything way down. Okay, so but that is not the case. As I already said, liquid. There are other mediums. My second most used medium, I should have a bottle of it here somewhere. My second most used, hear me clanging around, is Neo McGill. Let me see if I've got a bottle of Neo McGill. The worst named product in all of art is Neo McGill. So this is, for me, this is a slow dry product, but it's still faster than linseed oil. Anyway, those two mediums are the ones. I use that. If I get into many, many late layers, then I'll use Neo McGill. And otherwise, I'm using liquid. Now here is, if you're a traditional painter, I'm talking to you guys who are early journey painters, and you don't have a lot of experience, but you're trying to become a good painter. Listen to me. The default setting, I'm going to use the horrible word beginner. So you don't have to take offense. You don't have to call yourself a beginner. But here's what beginner painters do. They think, look at a medium like this, and they say, oh, I'm not sure why I have to go into this hyper-feminized mockery tone. Oh, but just bear with me. My wife hates it when I do that. My wife loves me, don't get me wrong. Here's the way a beginner thinks. They think, because they're accustomed, they learned from their teachers, if they're products of the 20th century, which frankly, you know, most people over the age of 30 are products of the 20th century art world, in which, and there's a historical reason for that, we're not going to go to it right now. Everybody learned to paint opaque, okay? And so when they're introduced to the concept of a medium, they think, oh, oh, I'm supposed to add a little bit of medium. I'm mocking that impulse on purpose. This is not what you do with mediums. It's not like salt and pepper in stew, okay? So you need to change your mind. Again, that's all beginners think that, oh, medium. Forgive me. I'm being so offensive right now, you can't even believe it. No, 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 quite the contrary. When you paint with a medium, if you want transparent glazes, you do this. Glug, 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 glug. So you have a big pile of this. This is a gel, so there's a pile on your palette, like I have right there. And you add a tiny bit of paint to the gel, to the medium. Okay, it's the other way around. It's not with the medium, it's with the paint. You do a tiny bit of paint and mix it with a lot of medium, all right? Somebody out there needed to hear that. And again, it's just universal. Universal when I'm trying to get people to catch the vision for transparent painting. Lots of medium, glug, 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 tiny bit of paint. All right. Now, I had to say that before I could go on to the next part, talking about the final glaze on a portrait. And I'm not ready to do this. These are all too dark. This one's a little bit lighter. So here's what I'm doing. I'm looking at my reference and looking at my photo, and I see this is a little bit too dark, although this is blown out. I am not going to make this as light as this, because this is unpleasant. So there you go. I could have tried to fix this in Photoshop, but Photoshop can only push it so far. So do you understand? This is what you call bad photograph. And most of the photographs you and I use are bad. So we don't copy the photograph. So this is too light, so I'm not going to go that light. But this has overall a slightly more orange-yellow cast than this does, right? So I have already mixed up a little bit. Let me point to you for just a second. Let me point you to my palette. So there's my pile of liquid, right? This is that. And I like the gel because then you don't need a cup. So I've got my brush, and it's, as you can see, it's this real cheap chip brush, pretty much saturated in liquid. And then I'm going to stick just 2 hairs into Indian yellow, 2 hairs into some kind of orange. I don't know what orange it is. All right, now that looks way too intense to me. It is way too intense. I know that just from experience. So I'm going to do 2 things. One, I'm going to just waste some paint, wipe that off, not clean it, just wipe it off, and pick up more liquid. All right, so that's probably just about the right concentration now. All right, now back to the painting at hand. I'm going to do a yellow-orange glaze over this whole thing. All right, so it all just got orange-er, yellow-er. All right, and you see how easy that was? Now, I'm not done, by the way. Don't panic. It's not going to stay like this. But before I even start tweaking it, I need to show you guys something. Again, you beginners, perhaps, sorry to use that offensive term, you early journey painters who are not familiar with glazing, let me show you why it's so safe and easy. I have a rag here that I've just dipped the corner of it in Gamsol. Down here, watch this. Now you understand this is dry, right? That's important. That's why I made the point earlier. Don't do this on a painting that's not dry. But I could have done this on Saturday, the day after. It just so happens I didn't paint this weekend. All right. Now I want you to breathe a sigh of relief and say, oh, well, I didn't know we could do that. Now I want you to know you can do that. If you put a glaze on and then you go, egads, that's terrible, you can take the glaze off. All right, so there you go. So all you scaredy cat beginners, that's not all of you, but that's some of you. You're afraid to try a new thing because you think it's scary or dangerous. Now you know. Oh. All right, I'm going to put it on again for the third time. That's really good. So you can see why glazing is, when it's a dry painting, glazing is so safe. And I'm going to put it on one more time. And again, that's even more intense than it was the first time. But that's right, I'm going to leave it because I'm going to go ahead now to the next step in this process. Having put on, by the way, I have a rag here that has Gamsol in it, and I'm touching it with my fingers. Okay, now I'm not scared to death. We could talk about coronavirus, but we won't. I am not scared of that either. But I do have a studio wipe. Somebody told me last week you could use baby wipes the same way. Here's why I don't want to do that, because I raised 2 or 3 babies, and to this day the smell of baby wipes reminds me of a poopy diaper. So it's an unpleasant association. And yes, I changed my share of diapers. I was a good dad. I changed enough diapers to know what's all right. So I just want, some of you are thinking, ooh, he shouldn't have his fingers in it. Stuff. All right, now I'm going to paint with a rag. And there's definitely much that I just put on here that's too much, too orange, right? Now, I did a similar thing to this the other day. If you watched my broadcast on Friday, I did a very similar kind of thing. I did a glaze, but I called that late glazing. I could have called it intermediate, but I called it late glaze. This is last glaze. So now I'm not done with the painting yet because I'm going to do final touch-ups. But this looks slightly better. It's a little yellower, warmer, orange-er, to use, elementary school language. It just looks better. And who am I saying hi to now? Hello, Somya D. Oh, good. Thank you. I appreciate the baby's eyes look so alive. Thank you very much. They do. Now it's time for me to, I was talking about earlier about how a more experienced portrait painter sees micro variations. They don't just paint the forehead like, ooh, forehead and highlight, shadow, midtone. I mean, it's good to make that observation, but now it's time for me to go, oh, wait a minute, I need to be a little more precise. And okay, since I'm going to be mixing paint for a couple minutes, let's move you down here. And this is Naples yellow. This is yellow ochre. Naples yellow looks a lot like a pale or light yellow ochre, right? This is oxide red, sometimes called transparent oxide, red oxide, or oxide red, all the same thing. Those two colors together, generally speaking, give a pretty good starting point for a flesh tone. All right, so what colors? Naples yellow and oxide red. I do not like using yellow or even Indian yellow. These are way too powerful, in my opinion. They're bucking bronchos color-wise. So the Naples yellow is a nice, easy to manage mid-tone. Now I'm going to add some titanium white. Again, the titanium white on my canvas here is fast dry or alkyd. For those of you who missed that, here's Winsor Newton, Griffin, alkyd. That's not a brand name. That's a kind. That means it has alkaline, like as opposed to, in high school chemistry, you learned about acids and pH balance and alkaline. Okay, that's related to that. Alkaline, fast drying oil color. And that's so that I can do these finishing touches, because almost all the finishing touches on a painting are lightening, adding light to the paint. I'm going to add, again, a little bit lighter. So there are a lot of good portrait painters who recommend mixing up a whole range of flesh tones before you get started. And I think that's a great idea. I just don't do it. So there you go. Having done a lighter area, now I'm using yellow ochre down here. So you can see what I'm doing, right? I am creating in advance. Oh, by the way, the people who recommend, and then of course, so this is sort of what flesh tone, light to dark. It could go lighter, obviously could go darker. But then there's also like across from that, going the other direction, would be redder. So I just picked up some Scarlet Lake, and so that's a blush red color, and I want something that's a little bit less red than that now, so I'm picking up some. Anyway, again, I don't want you to follow my recipe at this point. I just want you to catch the basic idea that I do generally go ahead and mix up a batch of flesh tones. My favorite color, the tube of paint that kills color the best, in my opinion, is raw umber. I don't want any of the blacks. They're too strong, they're too powerful, and of course, some blacks have a bluish tint to them. I don't want anything. Anyway, so that has a little bit of raw umber, not burnt umber. Raw umber is a very neutral, dull, dark gray. So that's probably good enough for me to start with. No, hang on. I'm going to change my mind. I want one that's slightly darker again. So I just picked up more oxide red and color killer, raw umber. I got burnt on the brain. And I add just enough liquid, just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of liquid to these so that the whole painting is dry by tomorrow. Okay. I'm going to wipe these brushes off just so that they're not loaded with paint and I can start picking up whatever paint I want. All right. Again, you do not need to follow my recipe for colors there. That just happens to be what I do most of the time, typical of me. Now, it's time to start looking at stuff. Now, I already pointed out a minute ago, I have a dark area in here. Oh, and by the way, you saw me mix up these colors. Probably more than half the time, when I reach down with my brush to pick up one of these colors, I actually combine two colors. Okay. So even though I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 colors on my palette, I have more like 16. All right, now let's see if I've got the right color in here. Nope, that's too light. Let's go a little bit redder and a little bit darker. Please understand that I do not need to panic about that wrong color. I just need to keep painting. You'll notice, perhaps, that I'm painting with my left hand, and my left hand, as you can see, I didn't do that on purpose. My left hand is wiggly and jiggly and is not as tightly controlled as my right hand is. My right hand is my control freak hand, and you need to watch out for that. I'm mixing up a darker color right now. And I'm dropping my brush. Did it hit? I don't think it did. All right. There's a crease right here. So I'm still doing details. And now again, I want something darker and redder. I talked the other day about, I don't have it on my palette right now, but I probably will at some point. I'll mix up a little pile of a color that I call black red, black red, which is a Chroma Black, that's a term. I didn't make that up. Chroma Black is a black made up of, well, since I'm talking here, let me just point you down at my palette again for a minute. Chroma Black is any of these colors that are transparent. So you have to stay away from yellow ochre, Naples yellow, and this yellow. And this orange is not very transparent, but most of the others are pretty transparent. Mix any two of those transparent colors together. Okay, let's go ahead and do it. My most common, my most favorite is Oxide Red. Let me clean off this brush a little bit. My favorite, my go-to, and I call this dark black, B-L-E-C-K, dark black, is Oxide Red and Ultramarine. Okay, so those two in the right ratio. If you do too much blue, it'll have a cool or bluish cast. If you do too much Oxide Red, it'll have a warm or brownish cast. Where you get right in the middle, that's virtually black right there. It's called Chroma Black. Now, if you want to, like you're thinking, yeah, but it looks a little bit brown, or you can come over here. Here's a great color to add to that, which is Dioxazine Violet. I'm going to add that to that. Now it has a little bit slightly purple cast. Or I can go to a great color to add combined with that is Viridian Green, or any of the transparent dark bluish greens is great. Then I might say, oh, but I think that's too green now. You guys can't see this. I'm sticking my brush, just the tip of my brush, into Permanent Rose. My point here that I want to make is Chroma Black. Again, I didn't make up that word. Chroma Black is a black made up of any of these transparent colors. It doesn't, you can go all over the place. All right, so that's just a pretty neutral as far to my eye right now. That's a pretty balanced mid-tone black. But because I'm doing a portrait, most of the time I don't want a mid-tone black or medium black. I want a warm black. So I'm going to pick up more Permanent Rose and pick up some of this, drag it over here. And now, that's what I call red black or black red. You rarely need anything darker than this in a portrait. In fact, rarely do you need anything close to that dark. But it already has a red tinge to it, so that it looks alive, looks living, looks flesh tone. Anyway, so there you go. Quick lesson. Some of you didn't need that, of course, but maybe somebody out there did. My air conditioner just came on. Thank God for air conditioning. We live in such luxury, don't we? Really? Think about it. Oh my goodness, here it is, the middle of August, and I'm upstairs in my studio, or downstairs if I was in my downstairs studio. Sitting in the yap of luxury, as I like to say. All right, since I've gone this far, let me finish the loop here a little bit. And if you watch me very often doing my cityscapes, for instance, here's one of my most foundational rules. If you want any part of your painting to be darker, you achieve that darkness by applying a transparent color. You get dark with transparency. Again, this is not 20th century. This is 19th century and before, okay? But this is the way to do it. The 20th century, we had some lessons to learn. We learned them. Now we're done. Now we can go back to real painting, as I like to say it, okay? Thank you, Clement Greenberg. We know the canvas is flat, okay? We really do. And we had to learn that lesson. That's a long story. This is as far as I'm going to go into it. So the rule is you get dark with transparent colors and light with opaque colors. If you want to see this spelled out more fully, then do a search in YouTube or do a search on my channel for Dan Nelson MUD, M-U-D. Okay, I've got an 11-minute video where I walk through this quite clearly. But, great big but behind. But, exception. When you're doing portraits, opaque, I'm sorry, let me say that. When you're doing portraits, transparent darks are almost always too dark. Okay, so portrait is when you're doing a portrait, my big rule does not hold forth. Okay? It gets trumped by a more important rule, which is that portraits are generally soft because faces are soft. They're not chiseled in stone. They're not hard edge and so on and so on and so on and so forth. All right. So even though you just saw me mix up a pile of black and then red black, I'm not going to use straight off the pile red black because it's too intense. So I'm mixing it now. You don't need to see me do this. I'm mixing it with some of my earlier opaque colors. So now I have a dark color, but they're not opaque, so it's not as dark. And there's a little line right here on her eye that needs to be darkened. Here's I want a little bit of red right there. When in doubt, scratch. Okay, I'm just looking at this eye right now. I'm not going to clean these brushes. I'm just going to wipe them off. So you understand they're still pretty contaminated with dark stuff. I don't want to go swishing, cleaning things thoroughly. It's a waste of time and a waste of product and so on. So, but I need a little tiny crease right here. Now let me go ahead and give you another lesson, quote unquote, if you will, while I'm at it. One of the rules, one of my universal rules that does hold true in portrait painting, same as everything else. So that I just a minute ago I gave you an exception, but here's one that is not an exception. It's another universal rule, and this one is darks first, lights last. In fact, when it comes to portrait painting, this rule is even more true in portraiture perhaps than it is anywhere else. You rarely finish a painting by making dark marks. If you make dark marks, that's just the wind up. You have to close the loop, and closing the loop is you finish with light marks. All right, so I'm mixing up with my dirty brushes down here, trying to mix up a pale, I'm not sure this is the right color, almost a little bit lighter and yellower. So some Naples yellow comes in real handy. And that's nice, but it's too much of a good thing. So I'm going to pick up my rag, and I'm not erasing, I'm painting with a rag. Okay, we talk about that quite a bit. There we go. Likewise, this area right here. And that was nice. Now, some of you, again, some of you early journey painters, you do need to be paying attention. If you want to be a better artist, now you can find people better than me online. I'm not all that. I'm just all that compared to some of you. We all have our place in the pecking order, don't we? But some of you need to be paying attention to the way that I'm holding my brushes. And yes, if you want to be a better painter, just stop. Say, I do solemnly swear I will never hold my brush in the death control grip for the rest of my life. So help me God. Things get intense around here. Things get really intense, don't they? Okay, see, look, I was just about to make a mark that way. But anyway, so clearly you can do this at times, but that should not be your normal modus operandi. That should not be the way you normally paint. You normally want to paint holding the brush side saddle. You want to hold the brush loosely. And then some of you, and I've been through this before, I just talked about this on Friday, and some of you say, yeah, but when I do that, my hand shakes all over. And you get mad at your hand for shaking, when in fact it is the shakiness of your hand that produces the best marks on your painting. Okay, the essence of good painting is making interesting marks. The essence of painting is making interesting marks. And some of you get mad at your hand for shaking, and when in fact, the shakiness is your friend, not your enemy. So some of you really need to make that adjustment in your thinking. Because part of you think, oh, if I was a good painter, my brush wouldn't wiggle. And almost the very opposite of that is true. All right, that's as much energy as I have for that lecture. I've given it before. I'll give it again, but I want to leave it right now. Whoops. Too much of a good thing? When in doubt, scratch. Okay, I'm going to I need some lighter stuff, I find now. I need some lighter paint. I'm actually going to pick up a tiny bit of orange. I don't know what orange it is on my palette, by the way. Many of you've heard me say that I don't use any cadmiums. I have no cadmium red, yellow, or orange. Not that I'm scared to death that it's going to give me cancer. You know, shown to cause cancer in lab rats in California. Yeah. Thankfully, I'm not a lab rat in California. But I figure, you know, a modicum of caution is reasonable. It's very reasonable. This right now, this is the lightest color. Come on in. The lightest color. This is the lightest color that I've been putting on this painting so far today. So I'm looking, again, I'm looking very carefully at the reference photo and trying to accurately imitate, render, be faithful to what's there. Okay, so there's, by the way, there is, let's be clear, there is this very real tension in representational painting, in good representational painting. And the tension is between realism and interesting marks. Okay? The more interesting your marks, the less realistic. The more realistic, the less interesting your marks. So if you're slightly confused, that's good. That probably means you're paying attention. Okay, the people who are not paying attention, they're going, oh yeah, I know, I do all that. No. This is confusing. Until it's spelled out for you. There is a very real tension between these two poles, these two impulses. One impulse is copy things accurately. The other impulse is make interesting marks. Okay, and every single one of us lands at a different point in that continuum. That's part of what makes you, part of what makes me, me. I saw on my Facebook, I think yesterday, I saw a self-portrait by, I will vainly say, my friend, because we did meet one time in Texas, and he was very friendly. Luis Escovedo or Escobedo, I forget. You know, that depends which way they. Anyway, Luis Escobedo or Escovedo, delightful man, older than me. His self-portrait. He's a better painter than me. And his self-portrait was just like, made me sick. You can look it up. Just go look for Luis Escobedo. I think it's a B with a B. And look up self-portrait. You can do that on Facebook. And you'll see his where he lands on the continuum between realism and looseness. He's quite a bit on the loose side of me, as tragically as are most portrait painters whose work I admire. But just because I admire them doesn't mean I can be them, and that's a real big lesson to learn. I could admire Luis Escobedo's work, but I can't be him. Even if I try, I can't be him. Anyway, so we are all unique. Part of the lesson there is, always be improving. So I look at Luis Escobedo's self-portrait and go, oh man, I get nudged toward looseness, right? But I can't be so derailed that I lose myself, so to speak. All right, here's a little correction. I'm not going to keep this broadcast going forever, because what I'm doing now, I fear, is just almost too small. It's not very exciting to watch. The changes are too finite for you to get much benefit from. But before I leave, though, let me do one thing, because this is suffering very definitely at the moment, and from a problem. I'm not worried about it because I knew it was coming. All right, here it is. Very often in the course of doing a portrait, the contrast gets exaggerated too much. For instance, look at the crease here. Now, and the lightness, darkness of that versus mine. Mine is way too dark right there. Mark Carder with a D. I know I talk about him a lot because he's a good teacher. I like what he does. He says this is the #1 mistake made by beginner portrait painters, or intermediate or early journey, is hyper contrast. It's my language, not his. He doesn't use that term, but that's basically what he says. Too much contrast. There's a reason for that, by the way, so don't be embarrassed, but just learn it and then absorb it and move on. The reason is because our eyes, our mind, of course, when I say our eyes, I'm really talking about the way our mind works. Our eyes are designed, geared to focus on sort of one thing at a time. And when we focus on that one thing, it tends to get magnified in our brain. Not only physically, dimensionally gets larger, that's a very real problem. But even, like, for instance, our brain sees darkness, and because we're focusing on it, we tend to exaggerate the darkness of that dark spot. So one of the things to watch out for, this has really been a help to me in my portraiture, is beware of exaggerated values, that the lights and darks get too contrasty. That is a definite mistake that I have made in years past in my portrait. I hope I'm not still making it. There's a good chance I am, but at least I'm still growing, still learning. All right, so I think I'm going to end this broadcast here. I've got a lot of work to do today. I would really like to have this portrait 99.9% finished by the end of day today. And if I can just force myself to keep my nose to the grindstone, I think that's a reasonable goal. I won't do this here. Here's a funny one. She is an African-American woman, but her eyes are remarkably pale, remarkably light. Actually, have a slight hazel. So I don't know if you guys can you look at? I have to squint to see how dark those eyes are, and how dark they are here. Can you see that they're too dark over here? Yeah, and that indeed is interfering, if you will, with realism, accuracy, a likeness. Just simply the fact that my irises are too dark over here. So maybe this will be the last thing I do. I'm trying to match a color. It's got a tiny bit of green in it, but green, that's relative. It's really brown, but has a slightly more green brown than the rest of it. Let's see if I can lighten this. Whoops, that looks horrible. Yeah, I'm going to paint with a rag. Again, I don't get mad, I don't get angry, I don't start erasing, cursing myself. I just paint with a rag. Okay, let's lift some of that out. And then I'm going to pick up a clean brush and pick up some of my Chroma Black. This is one spot where you in fact can use black, which is the pupil, right? We lost her pupil for just a second there, but now it's back. And then I need to add a tiny bit of reflection. Oh, here's another area. Here's another area where beginners, forgive me for using that term, where beginners tend to overdo it. They think, oh yeah, reflection, and their brush rushes to their pile of titanium white, and they go, and they put a way too intense reflection. Again, that's painting out of your filing cabinet. Your filing cabinet says, oh yeah, reflections, they're white, instead of painting out of observation. Ooh, that looks pretty good. This reflection, so watch out for that. I've got this light color. There's a part of her, white of her eye over here that should be slightly lighter. Painting with my finger there. Never paint with your fingers. You understand? I'm saying that tongue in cheek because I paint with my fingers all the time. But I don't have cobalts or cadmiums, you know, and I will, especially in the last year or two, habitually clean off my fingers that I painted with something. All right, this is looking good. It's not perfect. I'll keep working on her. One of the things I like about the way it is right now, it's accurate without being tight. The brush, there's energy. You can see human marks. You can see that a person took a brush and did this and that and this and that, and that's what I'm looking for. There's still little tweaks, like I need to make the red of her lip come down here again about, you know, a 64th of an inch down there, etc., etc. I've got a lot of work to do. I mean, I'm convinced I could call that finished, and no client would complain. But I'm not just here to satisfy a client, or you know, to just get the minimum done. I'm here to do a good portrait. I am not being. This is a coronavirus special. Still offering to do portraits for you guys outrageously cheap. Because I got to do something. Got to pay the bills. So I'd rather swallow my pride and work cheap than not work at all. So I am not one of those rich artists who struck it rich and my paintings sell for 5 figures. I wish. Maybe I'll get there someday. But in the meantime, today, Monday, August 24th, what is my job? My job is to be the best artist I can be today. All right. So with that, I'm going to bid you a fond adieu. Why do we slip into foreign languages when we want to sound smarty pants? It's called cliche. That's why. All right, let's see if somebody here is saying something I need to say hi to. Thank you for your chats. Hello, Stein Oldenhof. Netherlands? Somewhere. Yeah. I mean, Oldenhof. That's a pretty obvious clue, eh? And somebody named TRC450. Well, isn't that self-descriptive? I have no idea what that means, but thanks for saying hi. And Precision Art. Oh my goodness. First time live. Good to have you here, man. Glad you caught me. I hope it was more fun live than recorded. And by the way, I usually feel obligated to say, I'm really not painting in my bedroom. We have so many people living in our house right now. 9 to be exact. This many. 5 adults and 4 kids, that my brother-in-law sometimes sleeps in my studio. Anyway, there must be some need in me, a little bit of ego that it's like, oh no, people are going to think I'm painting in a bedroom. Nothing wrong with painting in a bedroom. Anyway, I'm going to quit. And then you guys don't have to put up with this silliness any longer. But I congratulate you for putting up with this silliness even this long. And as always, if I start doing something exciting or even mildly interesting on the rest of this portrait, I have a lot of work to do. One of the things I show you see how this face really comes forward, and everything else is too dark. So by the time I get all 4 faces up to this level, the background is too dark. So, but that's an easy fix. I'd rather have that, because that's just a one-step process. If it's too light, then it's a 2-step process. First, I need to darken the whole thing, and then you never finish your painting with dark marks. So it would be a 2-step, dark and then light again. Okay, so if it just needs to be lightened, that could be a 1-step process. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Darks first, lights last. One of the most universal rules there is. That's not a Dan Nelsonism. It's just one that I adhere to pretty carefully. I am happy to say that this was my most difficult face. This is the one I have struggled with the most. The rest of these, judging by the photograph that you see over there, is the others have a strong sense of likeness, and I double checked them to make sure they're accurate. But anyway, all right. What keeps me going as an artist, besides the need to make money, that keeps me going. What keeps me going is the hope of improving, the hope of getting better. So when my head hits my pillow tonight, I hope that I'll be saying, "Dang, I did a good painting today." And I just say that because I know many of you, you're just like me. That's a real artist attitude. Part of me should be saying, "Dang, I made so much money," that too. But what will really thrill me is if I do a good painting. And I wish the same for all of you. All right, doesn't that just sound Mr. Roger-ish? One of my heroes, truly. All right, bless y'all. Love y'all. Bye.